The moment you stop talking to a narcissist, their confidence doesn't fade. It fractures because your silence isn't ignored. It's interpreted as a threat. And what they do next tells you everything about how much power your presence was giving them. Pause here for a moment. If this feels familiar, reflect on how often your energy was used to keep someone else emotionally steady. And if this is helping you see the pattern clearly, stay with it, because silence isn't weakness. When you stop talking, the narcissistic personality does not register that silence as space, maturity, or self-protection. It is experienced as rejection at a psychological level, and rejection is intolerable to them. Their internal world is built on external feedback. Attention is not optional. It is stabilizing fuel. Your voice, your responses, even your reactions were constantly confirming their relevance and authority. Silence removes that confirmation abruptly, and the nervous system interprets it as abandonment, not distance. This is why the reaction is disproportionate to the action. You didn't attack them, insult them, or explain yourself, yet the internal response is extreme because the threat is existential rather than emotional. What makes this more intense is that silence offers no narrative they can control. Arguments can be twisted, apologies can be used, conflict can be reframed to maintain dominance. Silence gives them nothing to manipulate. There is no tone to dissect, no words to weaponize, no access point to reestablish superiority. That loss of leverage is destabilizing. Their mind starts filling in the gaps, often with catastrophic interpretations. They assume you are rejecting them deliberately, punishing them, or demonstrating independence, all of which strike at their sense of entitlement. Silence also removes their ability to regulate shame externally. Narcissistic structures rely on others to absorb discomfort through reassurance, compliance, or emotional labor. When you disengage, that shame has nowhere to go. It turns inward, and the psyche reacts defensively. This is why silence is often followed by hoovering, provocation, or sudden hostility. These are not attempts at connection. They are attempts to stop the internal freefall. Most importantly, your silence contradicts the role they assigned you. You were meant to respond, explain, soothe, or fight back. When you don't, it disrupts the script they depended on to feel powerful. That disruption forces them to confront something they avoid at all costs: the possibility that they are not in control, not central, not needed in the way they believed. When you stop talking, the second thing that happens is the removal of emotional regulation they were quietly outsourcing to you. A narcissistic personality does not self-soothe in the way emotionally integrated people do. Their calm, confidence, and sense of stability are not internally generated. They are borrowed. Conversations, arguments, reassurance, admiration, and even tension served a regulatory function. Your presence acted like an emotional pacemaker, keeping their inner world steady without you ever being told that was your role. When that regulation disappears, the system destabilizes. This is why your silence feels so disruptive to them, even if they appear indifferent on the surface. What looks like composure is often dissociation or delay. Internally, they are flooded with agitation, restlessness, and irritability because the external source that helped manage those feelings is gone. They may feel bored, empty, edgy, or suddenly preoccupied without consciously connecting it to you. That discomfort is unfamiliar and intolerable, which is why they instinctively try to reestablish contact in indirect ways. What's important to understand is that this regulation was never mutual. You were likely over-functioning emotionally while they were under-functioning. You explained things they refused to reflect on. You absorbed emotional fallout so they didn't have to. You stayed engaged during conflicts so they could discharge tension. When you disengage, that entire system collapses. They are left alone with feelings they never learned to manage, and the absence of your responses amplifies that void. This is also why they may escalate behaviors rather than de-escalate. Instead of calming down, they provoke. Instead of processing, they project. Instead of reflecting, they reach outward for stimulation, validation, or replacement. The goal is not connection, but relief. Any reaction from you restores regulation, even anger, because it reestablishes emotional movement and confirms influence. Your silence, in contrast, forces them into emotional stillness, which they experience as unbearable pressure. That pressure is not love, loss, or longing. It is dysregulation without an external outlet, a system searching desperately for equilibrium and finding none where you used to be. The third thing that happens is the assumption of control. When you stop talking, a narcissistic personality initially believes they are still in charge of the situation. This belief is not based on evidence but on pattern. In the past, distance was temporary. Silence was followed by explanation. Withdrawal was followed by reconciliation. They learned over time that you always re-engaged, that history becomes entitlement. Your return feels guaranteed, not hoped for. So in the early phase, they don't panic. They wait. They tell themselves you are cooling off, being dramatic, trying to get a reaction. In their mind, the power dynamic has not changed. This assumption is reinforced by their inflated sense of self-importance. They believe they are too significant to be truly ignored, too impactful to be left without response, too central to your emotional world to be removed without consequence. That belief allows them to remain passive at first. They may even feel superior, interpreting your silence as proof that you are struggling while they are unbothered. This is a psychological buffer that protects them from immediate injury. But this phase is fragile. It depends entirely on time. The longer the silence lasts, the more the assumption starts to crack. Each day without contact challenges the internal story that they are still in control. Each unanswered moment introduces doubt. They begin to sense that this silence is not strategic but final, not emotional but deliberate. That shift is deeply destabilizing because it contradicts their core belief that they dictate closeness and distance. What makes this especially unsettling for them is that they have no move to make without admitting loss of control. Reaching out too soon would mean acknowledging that your silence has power. Waiting too long risks losing access altogether. This internal standoff creates tension even if nothing is visible externally. They are watching the clock, not calmly, but calculating. Your silence exposes something they rarely face: the possibility that they are not the one deciding when connection resumes. That power reversal is subtle but profound. It marks the moment where entitlement gives way to uncertainty, and uncertainty is the beginning of narcissistic injury. The fourth thing that happens is the shift from assumption to panic once time stretches beyond what they can explain away. Delay is the trigger. Silence that lasts longer than expected dismantles their internal storyline, and with it, their sense of safety. This panic is not loud at first. It begins as restlessness, irritation, and inability to focus. They may feel compelled to check their phone repeatedly, scan social spaces, replay conversations, or imagine scenarios where you are moving on without them. What's activating is not loss in the emotional sense, but loss of dominance. Time is evidence, and evidence is dangerous to a narcissistic structure. As the delay continues, their nervous system goes into threat mode. The body reacts before the mind can rationalize. Sleep can become disturbed. Mood swings intensify. They may become unusually impulsive or agitated. This is the point where the confident exterior starts to crack internally, even if nothing changes outwardly. Panic emerges because silence combined with time equals independence, and independence in another person is experienced as betrayal. What makes this phase particularly volatile is that they are now aware something is wrong, but they cannot tolerate sitting with that awareness. They need to interrupt it. This is when urgency replaces arrogance. They may feel compelled to do something without knowing exactly what. The impulse is not thoughtful, it's reactive. Their system is seeking immediate relief from the discomfort of uncertainty. This is also when distorted thinking escalates. They may swing between believing you are suffering without them and fearing you are thriving without them. Both thoughts are intolerable. One threatens their superiority, the other threatens their relevance. The mind oscillates rapidly, increasing internal pressure. This pressure demands discharge. The panic intensifies because silence offers no reassurance, no feedback, and no emotional data. There is nothing to measure themselves against. They are alone with their internal state, and that state is unregulated. This is why delay is far more destabilizing than confrontation. Anger gives them something to push against. Silence gives them nothing. At this point, the fear is no longer about the relationship. It is about exposure. Your continued absence confirms that you are not waiting, not reacting, not orbiting. And that realization hits the deepest wound, that they are no longer the axis around which your attention turns. The fifth thing that happens is the beginning of hoovering, and it is often subtle enough to be mistaken for coincidence. At this stage, panic has found an outlet. Instead of sitting with discomfort, the narcissistic personality looks for ways to reestablish contact without openly admitting vulnerability. Direct communication would mean acknowledging that your silence has power, so the approach is indirect. This is why the behavior feels confusing rather than clear. A sudden like on an old post. A vague message that doesn't ask a question, a wrong number moment, an update shared publicly instead of privately. These are not accidents, they are probes. Hoovering is not about reconciliation or accountability. It is about restoring emotional regulation and testing access. They are watching closely for any sign that the door is still open. A reaction of any kind is enough. Curiosity, anger, nostalgia, even irritation all serve the same function. They confirm relevance. The narcissistic system does not distinguish between positive and negative attention. It only measures presence versus absence. What's important to understand is that hoovering often escalates in intensity if it fails. If subtle attempts produce no response, the strategy shifts. The tone may become dramatic, nostalgic, apologetic, or even hostile. The content is less important than the outcome. Each message is designed to bypass your boundaries and pull you back into engagement. This is why the behavior can feel emotionally disorienting. It may contradict how they acted before you went silent. That inconsistency is not growth, it is urgency. There is also a sense of entitlement underneath hoovering. They believe access should still exist, regardless of how you were treated. Your silence challenges that belief, and hoovering is an attempt to restore the old hierarchy where they initiate and you respond. If you don't, frustration builds quickly. The mask slips more easily here because the internal pressure is already high. Hoovering persists as long as there is hope of reaction. When silence remains intact, it forces a reckoning they try hard to avoid. Your non-response communicates something words never could, that they no longer have automatic access to your emotional world, and that loss of access destabilizes the entire dynamic in ways they are not equipped to handle. The sixth thing that happens is narrative rewriting. When hoovering fails and your silence remains intact, the narcissistic personality has to protect their self-image at all costs. They cannot hold the idea that they were left, ignored, or no longer chosen. That reality would require self-reflection, accountability, and emotional pain they are structurally unequipped to process. So instead, they reconstruct the story in a way that preserves superiority and deflects shame. In this rewritten narrative, you become the problem. Your silence is reframed as immaturity, instability, cruelty, or weakness. They may tell themselves you were too sensitive, too demanding, too dramatic, or incapable of handling them. This reframing is not about you. It is psychological armor. It allows them to convert rejection into self-righteousness. If you were flawed, then losing you is not a loss. It is relief. This process often happens both internally and externally. Internally, it soothes the ego by restoring a sense of dominance. Externally, it prepares the ground for justification if anyone asks questions. This is where selective storytelling begins. Details are omitted. Context is altered. Your silence is presented as proof of your dysfunction rather than a response to their behavior. The goal is not truth, but coherence, an explanation that keeps their self-concept intact. What makes this especially painful for survivors is that the rewritten story can sound confident and convincing. Narcissistic personalities often deliver these narratives with certainty, which can make others believe them and make you doubt yourself. That confidence is performative. It masks fragility. The louder the certainty, the more threatened the internal structure. Narrative rewriting also serves another function. It creates emotional distance. If they convince themselves you were never that important, they reduce the sting of your absence. This distancing is necessary because they still cannot tolerate the emptiness left behind. By diminishing your value, they attempt to shrink the impact of losing access to you. Your silence triggers this rewriting because it offers no counterpoint. You are not defending yourself, correcting the record, or engaging in debate. And that non-participation quietly undermines their new story, even as they cling to it. The need to rewrite at all reveals the truth they are trying to escape, that your absence mattered more than they can admit. The seventh thing that happens is escalation through devaluation and provocation once the rewritten narrative no longer fully stabilizes them. Even after telling themselves and others that you were the problem, the internal discomfort doesn't disappear. The silence is still there. The access is still gone. And that contradiction creates pressure. If you were truly insignificant, your absence wouldn't hurt. The fact that it does forces another defensive move. This is where devaluation becomes more active. They may speak about you with contempt, mockery, or dismissal. Your strengths are minimized. Your role is reduced. Your importance is rewritten as inconvenience. This is not confidence. It is an attempt to neutralize the lingering emotional charge you still carry in their mind. Devaluation is meant to shrink you so they can feel larger again. Provocation often follows. This can take many forms. Sudden displays of happiness, exaggerated success, new relationships presented publicly, or carefully curated images meant to signal that they are thriving without you. The intent is not joy, it is reaction. They are testing whether you are watching, whether you care, whether you will break silence to correct, confront, or compare. Any response would confirm they still occupy space in your emotional field. If public provocation doesn't work, it can turn more personal. Smear tactics may intensify. Subtle insults may be delivered through others. Situations may be engineered where you are likely to hear about them. This is not coincidence. It is a strategy to reinsert themselves into your awareness without directly reaching out. Direct contact would acknowledge loss of control. Indirect impact feels safer. What drives this escalation is unresolved narcissistic injury. Silence deprived them of validation, hoovering failed to restore access, and narrative rewriting couldn't fully erase the wound. Devaluation and provocation are attempts to discharge that injury outward. They are trying to make you feel what they are feeling: unsettled, diminished, reactive. Your continued silence disrupts this final strategy as well. It refuses the emotional exchange they are seeking, and that refusal communicates something profoundly threatening to them, that their attempts to provoke no longer determine your behavior. At this stage, the dynamic has fully shifted. They are reacting to you, not the other way around. The eighth thing that happens is forced confrontation with emptiness when every external strategy fails. When silence holds through assumption, panic, hoovering, narrative rewriting, and provocation, the narcissistic personality reaches a psychological dead end. There is no response to feed on, no mirror to reflect back importance, no emotional current to ride. What remains is an internal void they have spent their life avoiding. This emptiness is not quiet or peaceful. It is experienced as deadness, meaninglessness, or profound restlessness. Without external validation, the internal sense of self collapses into something hollow and undefined. They may feel bored but agitated, lonely but defensive, flat yet irritable. There is no clear emotion to point to, only discomfort without a name. This is why they often rush to replace rather than reflect. Stillness forces awareness, and awareness threatens exposure. At this stage, they often seek new sources of stimulation, attention, or admiration. This can look like sudden relationships, excessive busyness, risky behavior, or dramatic life changes. These are not signs of moving on. They are avoidance mechanisms. The goal is to drown out the silence you left behind, not to process it. The speed at which they replace or distract themselves is proportional to how destabilizing your absence feels. What is rarely discussed is that your silence interrupts their ability to outsource identity. You were part of how they knew who they were. Without you, there is no immediate reflection to confirm worth, desirability, or power. That absence exposes the fragile core they work relentlessly to conceal. They cannot sit with it for long, but they cannot fully escape it either. Your silence does something arguments never could. It bypasses defenses and removes supply without confrontation. It leaves them alone with themselves, which is the one relationship they struggle to tolerate. This is why silence is often remembered long after words are forgotten. It is not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it revealed a truth they were never ready to face.